welcome back to Crypto Bits. I am your host, Brittany, and today we have Cas Piancey joining us. Welcome to the show, Cas.
Hey, how are you?
Good, good. I hope you're doing well. So just to start us off, do you think you could start by explaining a little bit about yourself, when and how you first got involved in Bitcoin, and when you started to fall down the rabbit hole, so to speak?
Sure. I got interested in Bitcoin in around April of 2017 because my roommate, his significant other got invested in Ethereum at the time, and so he told me to buy Ethereum, and I'm generally a skeptical person, so I didn't buy Ethereum, but I started to learn about the broader ecosystem. I got really into Bitcoin in about August of 2017 after I felt like I'd learned enough. So I purchased a minimal amount, not very much, but I purchased a minimal amount, and I continued to buy minimal amounts through roughly November of that year, November, early December, maybe. But then I found Bitfinex, and after I found his blogs and his Twitter account, I stopped.
And what did you see specifically that you were like, hold up?
Yeah, so he was talking a lot about an exchange called Bitfinex, which I think has kind of fallen by the wayside nowadays for retail at least, but is still one of the larger volume exchanges out there. At the time, Bitfinex was the #1 Bitcoin exchange. But what really drew my attention to the whole thing was actually Tether, the stablecoin. It's a stablecoin. It's supposed to be one-to-one backed by US dollars. So for every Tether that exists in the world, hypothetically, back in 2017 at least, they were supposed to have a dollar sitting in a bank account to back that up and ensure that anyone who had one could redeem it. What I found really interesting about that was that Bitfinex had purchased Tether and done everything in their power. And I don't mean Bitfinex itself, but the parent company of both of those companies purchased Tether and tried to not let anyone know about it. And the only reason people found out about that ownership was because of something called the Panama Papers, the Paradise Papers. They were released by a media conglomerate called the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, the ICIJ. So they exposed this ownership, and the fact that they'd been hiding it and the fact that Tether was the main stablecoin in the system began to bother me.
Understandably so. I think recently, talking about Tether specifically, they came out and, like you said, they're supposed to be back 1-to-1. And then, in I think it was 2019, they said it was only backed by 74 cents. And then in May of this year, they came out and said something along the lines of, oh, it's backed by like 65% backed by something called commercial paper. Do you believe, with all of these things, that including the part that they consistently refuse to do audits? And I want to say they did like an internal audit by somebody using somebody that is like associated with the company or something, but it was like an internal thing. And that he's the one that came out and said, yeah, everything's fine. But is it really fine, when they're not agreeing to do like actual audits by certified people outside of the company? And it's when they're changing the narrative so much. Okay, it's supposed to be back 1-to-1. Oh, it's back 70, by 74 cents. And now it's mostly backed by commercial paper. First of all, what does commercial paper even mean? That could mean that it's other players are involved. It could be backed by anybody. We don't know who it's backed by. Who is the commercial paper backed by, and why does the narrative keep changing? All of these things are interesting details for a company that's supposed to be largely transparent. And I guess that's worrying to anybody in the space.
Right, or it isn't. I mean, what we've seen a lot of pushback from the cryptocurrency community in general, because the larger players will attest to the fact that they have essentially had no issues with Tether, with being able to redeem Tether, with the executive leadership at Tether. So there's a lot of pushback on that. I think there's so I want to clarify just a couple things here. I am not an auditor. I'm not a lawyer. I can't give out legal advice. I can't explain in great detail every intricate little bit that alters what they've done versus what an audit would show.
Right.
But what I can tell you is that they've never done any kind of audit. It's not an internal audit. It's not a security audit. It's nothing. It is nothing. It is an assurance opinion. And the other ones, they were attestations, which are just a glimpse at bank accounts by a third party. So that really does not mean anything, because the question isn't whether or not they could have money or cash equivalents in a bank account. The question is how they got there. And like you were kind of bringing up there about the commercial paper and many of these other cash equivalents and other assets that they hold, who are they acquiring them from, and what is the actual value of these assets, right? And we don't know the answer to that.
Right. No, and it's, to me, it's kind of a big deal, because if you say, okay, we're going to back Tether 1-to-1 to USD, then it needs to be backed by 1-to-1 USD. And the fact that it's not, and we don't know what exactly or who exactly is backing it with these commercial papers, that to me is sort of like misleading to the public, to the consumers, the customers. Because if you say you're going to have something, then it should be the way that you say it is. And the fact that it's not is concerning, at least to me. And
yeah, I agree with you. Obviously, I agree with that. Because like you're saying, they've changed the narrative a lot since the very beginning. But I also want to point out that most people understand that if you literally had only cash in a bank account for every Tether, you would be almost making no money. I don't know what interest rates are right now for savings accounts. It's less than 1%. I think it's less than 0.5% right now. So even with $60 billion covering your costs for custodying that money, paying employees, and doing all this other stuff, you might not even be able to cover those costs, right? So you have to find that yield somewhere. And most people will take some other stuff like treasury bills. You can argue that is a pretty safe cash equivalent. You could argue that commercial paper by specific companies. So if we're talking about commercial paper, for anyone who isn't exactly clear, it's just short-term debt issued by a company. So if it's commercial paper issued by Apple or IBM or, Berkshire Hathaway, obviously that there's very little concern about that commercial paper going to zero. It's more concerning if, like the rumors are that are circulating, if it's like Chinese real estate commercial paper, then you have a problem on your hands.
right.
It likely isn't valued at the monetary value that they're saying it is.
Right. And yeah, just not knowing who it's backed by, I agree. It is a concern. But it like you said, it could be untrustworthy backers. It's hard to tell when there is no official audit or anything being done to confirm or deny any of those statements. And I think I think a lot of people are concerned because there's this narrative going around right now where back in, hold on one second, I think it was 2017. I don't think anybody's disputing the fact that Tether had a huge thing to do with the Bitcoin bull run of 2017. But here in my notes, it says research by John Griffin and Eamon Shams in 2018 suggested that trading associated with increases in the amount of Tether and associated trading at the Bitfinex exchange accounted for about half of the price increase in the Bitcoin bull run of 2017. I don't think anybody's disputing that. But basically, that means that half of the money that was being dumped into Bitcoin, at least at the time, was Tether. And some might say, okay, big deal, whatever. But with everything that's going on with, them changing the narrative and then, no audits being done and this, that, and the other, and then not knowing who it's backed by, that's a large amount of liquidity to be in the market to just not know what it's, And like I said, the narrative right now is that Tether has Bitcoin on life support. And I know there's a lot of people who agree with that statement and think, yes, that is truth of the matter. And then there's other people that are like, maybe not so much. I don't think it's that big of a deal. But since it has been stated that Tether has Bitcoin on life support and other cryptocurrencies due to the amount of liquidity in the market, it would also seem that Tether is the thing propping it up. When do you believe that regulations will get to a point where it addresses this Tether issue? And do you believe personally that Tether is going to collapse? And if so, do you think it's going to bring down the market? I mean, what's your take on all of that?
Yeah. So to start off, I think there are a lot of people who disagree that Tether had anything to do with the 2017-2018 bull run.
Okay.
I tend to, it's the number one liquidity provider. So I think no matter what, you have to attest to the fact that it's important. It's an important player in the ecosystem always. So I don't take issue with that just because to me, it's obviously the number one on-ramp for dollars, however real they may be. But there's plenty of people, including my buddy Bennett Tomlin, who take issue with the Griffin and Shams paper in some aspects. I think a lot of people, myself included, think that it would be a lot easier to pump the price of altcoins and shitcoins, excuse my French, but as opposed to Bitcoin, because there's just so much more liquidity in Bitcoin than in any other cryptocurrency asset. I guess Ethereum is sort of getting closer now, but still, nonetheless, you're talking about way less liquid assets besides Bitcoin that would be essentially far more worthwhile to pump and dump than trying to lift the price of Bitcoin alone. So that's that bit. Do I think regulators are, when do I think regulators will move in? I think we're seeing already movement from them. We're seeing a criminal probe with an intent letter being sent to the executive leadership of Tether, at least some of them, from the Department of Justice, which I think is a really big deal that people are just kind of hand waving away. We're seeing regulators from Janet Yellen at the Treasury to people in the Fed, including Jerome Powell, talking about stablecoins, talking about stablecoin regulation, talking about the need to do something about it right now.
Right.
So we're seeing the beginnings of that. Now the final question becomes, do they actually try to take down Tether? And to me, that's like a coin flip. I don't know if they do. I've been following this for a long time, and I'm probably less sure about what happens with Tether today than I was when I started this whole crusade, just because, and I didn't start this crusade, Bitfinex started it, but when I joined is what I mean to say. But I don't know, because what I've seen over and over again from regulatory agencies is their willingness to fine bad actors and walk away. So whether we're talking about EOS and Block One getting their slap on the wrist fine, or Bitfinex and Tether getting their $18 million fine in New York, or BitMEX getting a $100 million fine from the CFTC recently. At the end of the day, those are tiny amounts of money to these companies, and they're just going to keep doing whatever they want to do if that is going to be the end result. It doesn't stop HSBC. It doesn't stop Bank of America. It ain't going to stop BitMEX. It ain't going to stop Bitfinex and Tether. So I don't know. I don't know if Tether gets fined. I don't know if Tether actually gets shut down. Both are equally likely in my mind. And equally easy too, right? Like either they walk in, find them, who knows what, 50 million, $100 million. It wouldn't matter. They'd get a nice chunk of change out of it and get their budgets upped for the next year as a regulatory agency. And the alternative could be that they shut it down completely, which would also be incredibly easy because Tether is just a centralized token.
Right. Well, I think, and the regulations are coming down the pike. Senate's the U.S. government moves at a snail's pace when it comes to regulations. They've known about cryptocurrencies for a while now, and it doesn't seem like they have really taken it super seriously until recently. And then all of a sudden, there's all of these new things coming down the pike. So really, it really wouldn't shock me if regulators came out soon and said, okay, yeah, you guys need to fall in line. Here's a slap on the wrist, pay the fine, kind of thing. That wouldn't shock me at all. Whether or not they get taken down as a result, I don't know. I think with the narrative that, Tether does kind of have it on live support, BTC on life support, some in the cryptocurrency space believe that. I think it would be harder, for regulators to come out and just say, yeah, no, you guys need to shut it down. Because there are a lot of senators and people involved taking, donations in cryptocurrencies. And I think a lot of people in the government, this is personal opinion, I'm not saying this is truth, but I think there's a lot of people in the government who are willing to be like, oh, let's not screw with cryptocurrencies so much because we don't really know a whole lot about it. And I don't want to waste a good thing when I'm benefiting from it. I wouldn't say that's everybody, but some people there.
There's certainly a level of not wanting to impede, quote, innovation, unquote. But I think there's also a level of I don't know how many of them would be accepting cryptocurrencies themselves, but I think there's plenty of trading desks, high frequency trading desks, hedge funds, venture capitalists, and incredibly wealthy individuals who love cryptocurrency markets, whether it's because of the liquidity of some things or whether it's because of not having like we're talking about, the same regulatory presence. So you can things like wash trade, and you can do things like front run, and these are things that were outlawed decades and decades and decades ago in traditional markets, and you can still just go ahead and rock and roll and do that. And I think that it would be likely that senators would be influenced in traditional lobbying ways by traditional firms more than like Bitfinex ain't paying senators for their opinions. Traditional lobbyists probably.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, regulations are coming. The Biden administration has made it perfectly clear that they intend to use taxes on cryptocurrencies to help fund different bills that, and budgets and whatnot. I mean, that's kind of aside from the point. Regulations are coming. I think regulations are a fairly good thing for the space because it does help put more trust, because I believe a lot of people, even perhaps maybe like yourself, would be a little bit more trusting of the cryptocurrency markets if there were a little bit more regulations, and that these big corporations in the cryptocurrency space were being held accountable for, for instance, like Tether changing the narrative back and forth. Um, so we'll see what happens. I'm not saying anything is definitely going to happen or that it's going to impact the space significantly, but when regulations do come, it's definitely it's going to do something. But with all of these regulations, Binance in particular, we've seen a lot of regulations come for Binance. And many have started talking about how Binance is attempting this huge giant rug pull. And with Binance, they've been known to mix coins, fraudulent, coins, just use tainted coins. So they've been known to do that. And I think that's part of the reason why they started getting, more regulatory framework being spit their way, so to speak. But they've also been known to be decreasing the amounts of withdrawals lately. And I think that sends up a huge red flag in and of itself, not to mention a lot of these Binance CEOs have begun stepping down. So what's your whole take on that? And, do you think that they're insolvent, and what do you think will happen when they get delisted in October?
Delisted in October by whom?
I've just been hearing all over the place. I don't have the specific article pulled up. I apologize for that.
I don't know what that refers to, but that's okay. In regards to the rest of it, I won't make a statement on that bit. I don't, because I don't know anything about it. When it comes to the way Binance operates, I'd urge your listeners to look into something called the Tai Chi documents, which were reported on by Forbes, Michael Del Castillo. That was back in, I think, 2019, maybe. Basically, Binance has been doing something very obvious, I think very obvious to anyone who sees the way exchanges have to. So if you think about the way an exchange has to operate for a minute, it's pretty simple, right? You have to have servers operational so that traders can come and trade on your platform. You need some sort of marketing campaign. You can probably get that done with cryptocurrency, but you also need to be paying for server space, and you need to be paying employees, and you need to be paying for electricity and a few things that will require some amount of fiat currency, right? Because you're not going to be able to pay for all of this stuff with just Bitcoin or just cryptocurrencies. So at the end of the day, Binance needs some amount of fiat to keep the lights on. They've known this for a long time. What they started doing, I don't know if it was in 2018. I think it was in 2018. They started opening up fiat exchanges in tiny countries. So they would go to, the first one I believe was Uganda. They would go to Malta. They would go to Jersey, which is, for your listeners, in case I'm like a geography nerd, that Jersey is like a tiny island off of the coast of England. So they would set up tiny fiat exchanges in tiny places, with the goal being that they would acquire some amount of fiat and be able to utilize that fiat in ways that they can't utilize the cryptocurrency. That's how they're making money, right? They're making money on transaction fees, and those transaction fees are strictly on cryptocurrencies. So they're not making any fiat at all for Binance, the exchange itself. But when you start setting up these fiat umbrella companies, or whatever, not even umbrellas, sorry, subsidiaries, that you are able to acquire small amounts of fiat from all these different places, and then you can pay your bills. They did that with Binance US. That it according to the Tai Chi documents, at least, is that Binance US was set up in a similar fashion, where they knew they were breaking the rules. They knew that they just needed fiat for however long. It would inevitably get shut down or fail. And it didn't matter, because as long as you can acquire some fiat, that's the entire point. So I think a lot of these exchanges operate that way. And what we're seeing is a worldwide crackdown on Binance. I don't know if it's 10 or 15 different countries. Like, it is a significant amount of countries. We're talking about the Thai SEC. We're talking about Canadian regulators. We're talking about US regulators, including IRS and I believe the DOJ. So we're talking about Cayman Islands looking into them. I mean, I don't know what you have to do wrong to get the Cayman Islands looking into you financially, but Binance was able to do that. So I don't know. I don't know what happens. I don't know if Binance is playing 8D chess and they're 100,000 moves ahead of everyone and CZ has a plan and knew this was all coming. Who knows? Maybe he's as smart as all of the crypto bros say he is. But it sure feels like there's a lot of regulatory pressure, and it sure seems like all of them really don't like Binance. So who knows what that means? It doesn't seem good for Binance, I think, is general sentiment.
And sorry, I just want to clarify. I was talking about the stock tokens being delisted from Binance. They're delisting. Yeah. So I had put it in there and then I had a brain fart when I said it, because I was like, wait a minute, I wrote that incorrectly to make it sound like I was saying that Binance itself was being delisted.
Okay, so they've been listing tokenized stocks. Okay, yeah. A lot of exchanges do that, by the way. FTX does that, and others. I think that is generally begging regulators to slam you. It's so hard to become a serious brokerage firm in America. There's many that people are going to be familiar with. It doesn't add Charles Schwab or Fidelity or Robinhood. Robinhood isn't even exactly on the same level as those, I would suggest. But yeah, Charles Schwab, Fidelity, others. These companies have to go through crazy hoops to be able to list all of these things and you can have an FDIC insured account. There's a lot of things that they have, hoops that they have to jump through to be able to do that. Binance and FTX did none of them. And I just, you hope that everything is going to be okay, because I don't like to see people get hurt, even as a skeptic and a cynic. And I would prefer, honestly, I would prefer that no one, if there's some way that no one gets hurt, that's great. But I do think that it's a huge risk to list tokenized stocks, and everyone's talking about it these days. Everyone's talking about it like it's a great idea. But we're already digitally trading stocks. I don't understand why we need to make derivatives of stocks. And it seems like an incredibly bad idea to me.
Yeah, especially since I think that was one of the main fights in the Senate recently, talking about the term broker and how it pertains to people involved in the cryptocurrency space, not just exchanges, but the broad use of the word broker could incorporate non-exchange people, like people who don't even have access to that type of information, personal information on others as well. So I think the government is definitely taking a look at all of this, and that could be why all of a sudden, Binance is deciding, we need to delist these stock tokens and whatnot, because if we want to try to conform to the new regulatory framework that is being set out, then we best get a handle on it right now. I mean, they could be doing everything by the book, and like you said, CZ could just be incredibly genius. But the thing, I guess, that gets me is that Binance is now like the biggest exchange. And back in the day, so was Mt. Gox. And there was nobody at the time that Mt. Gox was around, before everything started coming out. And then there were red flags that believed that Mt. Gox could ever go down. It was just one of those things a lot of people had a lot of trust in Mt. Gox at the time. But then, of course, we know that it went down. And what was his name? Mark Karpelès had Roger Ver come out, and Roger Ver got on and was all like shilling Mt. Gox, saying, oh yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Meanwhile, him and all the other, well, I'm not going to say him specifically, but the CEOs and everybody, they were definitely stuffing their pockets, full of Bitcoin and then heading for the door. I don't think it really mattered about fiat. They were still just taking the tokens themselves, the coins themselves. And I thought it was interesting too. Around the time that all of that was happening, Jesse Powell, the CEO of Kraken, was at Mount Gox, and like a month before Mount Gox went down, Jesse Powell started working on Kraken. And I think Bloomberg at the time talked to him and was all like, "Oh, well, why are you doing this?" And his response was, "Oh, it's just in case. It's just in case." And so I think a lot of people at the time should have seen all of those red flags and realized, okay, something is about to happen. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot of right now in terms of, what's happening with Binance. I think there's a lot of red flags coming up that should be concerning people because exchanges are, not for certain. I don't want to get too much into it, but I don't know. I don't really know what to say about it, but I think it was Mr. Whale on Twitter was talking about how there was a ton of people who were reporting that they couldn't even withdraw funds on Coinbase yesterday. And I think that was on Reddit. So I think there's a lot of people scared in the space right now about, okay, what's safe, what's not safe. You can't trust Binance, Bitfinex, even Coinbase right now. What do we do? And
all of this kind of, in some sense, runs counter to the ethos of the space that started so long ago, which is that, of course, you can still utilize Bitcoin and a lot of these other cryptocurrencies without needing to use an exchange. And I don't know, this reliance on third parties, trusting giant third parties. I wouldn't trust CZ as far as I could throw him. And I certainly wouldn't trust Binance to be looking out for my best interests ever. That goes for Coinbase, that goes for Kraken, that goes for Gemini, that goes for Wobi, OKEX, like all of them. They all are third parties that are trying to make a buck. They're all giant casinos. And I don't know, do you trust a casino to have your best interests in mind when you go and walk in the doors? Of course not. Of course not. So, like, I think it's a weird idea that it is transformed into really just complete dependence on cryptocurrency exchanges. And I really do think at this point that having a hardware wallet, storing your coins on a hardware wallet, and even trading locally, like all of these things have just kind of fallen to the wayside. And I don't know what that is supposed to mean. I don't know what that's supposed to signify. We've seen
it's just new people coming into the space, not really knowing everything, because it does come in waves. New people come in waves on the bull markets of Bitcoin. And you'll see people leave during the bear markets. But on the hype of these bull markets, a lot of these people come in, they have no idea. They're like, oh, let me just figure out how to buy it. And then they leave it on the exchange, they forget about it, or they sell it, and whatever it is that they do. But I think there is a lot of I wouldn't say misinformation, but a lot of people just aren't educated enough on the cryptocurrency space before they begin investing. Like you were like, okay, I was told to invest in this. Let me do some investigative research on what it is before I just start throwing money at this. And I don't believe a lot of new users into the space are, I don't want to say that intelligent, less intelligent, I guess, but I don't believe that they do the homework that they should be doing before investing.
I think that's just a common, right? I mean, like that's just common to finance. It's not just cryptocurrency.
Right.
Like if someone walks up to a random person and says, oh, I think you should invest in Palantir. Like most people won't know what Palantir does. They just will be like, okay, a friend told me to put $1,000 into this thing. I'll do it. I think that's a mistake. But at the same time, if I had listened to my friend, this is, going back to the moment when my friend told me in April of 2017 to purchase Ethereum, if I just ignored my own desire to discover what the hell was going on, I would have made probably tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I'm sure for a lot of people, the pain of that would hurt them a lot. That doesn't bother me. I know who I am. I'm never going to be that guy. And that's fine. But like you said, now I know, at least if I wanted to buy cryptocurrency, I have a hardware wallet. I know how I could do it in ways that wouldn't require me essentially buying crypto from an exchange, which I think is now just the ultimately what everyone says you should go do.
Right. Well, I mean, I agree completely. I mean, yeah, it's hard for some people. I mean, I know that when I first got into Bitcoin, I got into Bitcoin in 2017, but I was told in 2011 by my friend to invest. And if I had listened, yeah, we'd all be there. But I also take comfort too in the fact that had I listened, there's a good chance that I would have been on Mount Gox and gotten ran away with. There's so many things that have happened in the space in terms of development since then to now. There's a good chance that even if we had invested that early or earlier, that we wouldn't have the funds that we have today. And that comes from the advancements that have been made and the new exchanges that have come since then. Because back in the day, it was a lot harder to actually store your cryptocurrency. So you actually had to do the investigative research to figure out, okay, if I'm going to buy this, first of all, where do I buy it? Second of all, how do I hold it? Just because there wasn't that many options back then, but now there's so many options. People just see it as a safe haven, like, oh, it's okay, I'll just hold it on Robinhood. Horrible idea. I'll just hold it on Binance, Kraken, whatever, it doesn't matter. So I think it comes with the framework, and I think people have been misled, so to speak, in that sense. But
and we've seen a transition from I'm sure you remember in 2017 and 2018, exchanges were getting hacked left and right. It was not uncommon for at least once or twice a week to see some sort of news story about an exchange losing Bitcoin, Ethereum, something, or exit scamming, disappearing. Like, it happened all the time. And what we've seen this time is that it's all of those scams and hacks and all of the shenanigans have kind of moved to the DeFi space as opposed to cryptocurrency exchanges. But maybe, like you're saying, if the exchanges are seen as a safe haven right now, I would assume it's only a matter of time until some hacker somewhere figures out some tiny bug that they can take full advantage of on a big exchange, and then that's the wake-up call. I mean, we saw the $600 million Poly hack.
Yeah,
and
nuts.
No one knows what the hell is going on with that exactly, I think. But yeah, white hat hacker, apparently. So we're seeing this stuff now taking place, and we'll see what the ramifications are. Who knows what that will be.
Right. No, I definitely agree. I mean, recently I interviewed Daniel Krowitz, who's been in the space for a really long time. And he described Bitcoin as a Ponzi scheme, where Bitcoin is kind of like this island. And all these pirates went to the island looking for treasure, and then they get to the island and realize, okay, well, in order to get rid of the treasure, I got to get off the island. In order to use the treasure, I have to get off the island. And so in that sense, they lure people into the island. And then when these newer people get to the island, they, shank them, steal their boat, and right away. And so in that sense, from what he was saying, it's kind of like a Ponzi scheme where you have to bring people in order to get out yourself. And with people like Michael Saylor coming out and saying, mortgage your house, buy Bitcoin, sell your wife and your kids, blah, blah, blah. Do you agree that it is sort of does validate the idea that Bitcoin may be the biggest Ponzi scheme ever? Or do you think,
I mean, I think there's it has Ponzi qualities to it. I think it's hard to deny that. It certainly has Ponzi-like dynamics in some aspects. To be fair, I think certain things like Social Security also have Ponzi-like aspects to them. So I don't think just having certain Ponzi-like features makes something a scam. I think there's some real world value to what Bitcoin provides. If we reflect on it, it might be very niche, and it might be very there hasn't been a lot of you know, and I'm sure there's plenty of people who are going to disagree with me on this, but I haven't seen a lot of real world use case built from decentralized finance in general.
It's a good concept. It's a
right,
great concept.
interesting concept, and not just interesting, but like could be very useful for certain things. So I think that there's a use case here for journalists and reporters on some level, getting if you're in an oppressive regime that doesn't allow freedom of speech, cryptocurrency could be a great way to still get paid and be able to live a life and do a job that's very important. There's clearly some use cases for these things. And when you reflect on what a Ponzi scheme is, so I assume all of your listeners are quite familiar with the story of Ponzi, but Ponzi, you know, saw a real world arbitrage opportunity that could never be actualized. It was something called reply coupons, which were it basically would allow you to send a letter back to someone without having to pay full postage. And he realized there was an arbitrage opportunity there, but then he just never did it, right? And the idea with the Ponzi itself was that there was no product. He was accepting people's money, promising a return on that money, and then handing that money back out. I see real world use for Bitcoin. I see that there is some niches for Bitcoin and for cryptocurrencies. That does not mean that they don't have some aspects that are similar to what I just described.
Right. No, I definitely agree. And there's been, you know, there's been a lot of allegations and just scandals in the space. It's not just all, you know, to the moon type stuff. Reggie Fowler, let's talk about him for a second. You know, he was the founder of Crypto Capital, and he was, you know, allegedly a part of one of those operators who was part of the shadow banking whole thing. And I think he was at the heart of that $850 million Bitfinex Tether scandal that you were talking about, you brought up earlier. Can we talk about him for a little bit? What do you think is going to happen with people like him in the space specifically?
Yeah, well, let's just delve in a little bit into Crypto Capital Core. Was the shadow bank of choice for all cryptocurrency exchanges for the most part, whether it was Kraken, Bitfinex, Quadriga CX, I don't know. A ton. BitMEX used them. A lot of people were using these guys as the shadow banking company for choice for the entire space. They were located in Panama, and they were run by a gentleman named Ivan Manuel Molina Lee. He is a Canadian and Panamanian dual citizen. And then there was Reggie Fowler, who you mentioned. And Reggie Fowler is a kind of longtime scammer. He's defaulted on payments to, he was going to be part owner of the Minnesota Vikings. He defaulted on payments for that. He tried to start his own football league. He defaulted on payments for that. He's just a long time American scammer. And then the other two people involved in this were brother and sister, Oz Yosef and Ravid Yosef. And so these people all, the Crypto Capital started by Ivan Manuel Molina Lee. He started it in 2014. And then all these people got brought on over time. I think Oz Yosef got brought on in sometime after that, probably around 2016 or so.
It was my understanding that Ravid hadn't been caught yet. Has she been caught too?
We do not know. So yeah, let me put it this way. Reggie Fowler and Ravid Yosef both got charged by the Department of Justice for fraud, conspiracy to commit bank fraud. and running a money transmitter license business without a license.
Mm.
So they got charged, and Reggie Fowler was almost immediately arrested. Before that, even, Ivan Manuel Molina Lee was arrested in Greece, sent to Poland. He has been in Polish jail ever since. No one knows what's going on with him. I think he's been in jail for, I don't know, he's been in prison for 2 or 3 years now, and literally no one knows what's going on. So Reggie Fowler out on bail, but going to be tried next year. So in 2022, Reggie Fowler will be tried for bank fraud and all of these other charges that he's facing. He also was caught counterfeiting $14,000 in US dollar bills when he was arrested. Another story, he's not being charged for that, so it doesn't really matter. And then the only two people who weren't caught at this point were Oz Yosef and Ravid Yosef. Oz Yosef and Ravid Yosef were likely in Israel. They're Israeli citizens, so they have Israeli citizenship and they can stay there. Trying to extradite people from Israel is not easy. So trying to get them out of there and back to the US didn't seem like a realistic goal. But recently, a 39-year-old woman who no one knows the name of, and no one knows really who she was working with or what she was doing, was arrested in England with roughly $150 million of cryptocurrency seized from her at that moment, and $450 million in total worth of cryptocurrency, I think, under her possession. So they seized what would seem to be an amount of cryptocurrency that only someone like Ravid could have, and that matches the description of Ravid. So 39-year-old woman, international, not from England, and this much money. It sounds like it's Ravid Yosef. Sounds like she was apprehended in England at some point, but we don't know because she hasn't been charged with anything yet. And until she's charged by the English police force or secret, whatever, whoever ends up charging her, then we don't know anything. So it sounds like she's caught, which might mean that the crypto capital story as a whole could very well finally be coming to an end. But yeah, Crypto Capital Core is what caused Quadriga CX to collapse, and is part of the reason why all of us know what's going on with Bitfinex and Tether now, because $850 million was frozen, and frozen in Polish and Portuguese bank accounts. And that freeze caused Bitfinex to not be able to pay out customers who wanted to withdraw. And so then Bitfinex made the daring and bold decision to borrow without asking $850 million from their sister company.
It's a lot. It's a lot. And, all of these executives from all of these exchanges too, even exchanges or just, it all seems to be connected is what I'm trying to get at. We have Jesse Powell, who is in some way or another connected to Peter McCormack. Peter McCormack did an interview with Jesse Powell where he went on the record basically saying that he was accepting donations from Jesse Powell. What those donations are for, what it's used for, I don't know. I'm not saying there's anything nefarious going on there, but because Jesse has the ties to, Mt. Gox going down, and the other CEOs have been known to have stolen BTC and coins from the exchange as it was going down. Who's to say that Jesse Powell, the CEO of Kraken, didn't do the same? If I were Peter McCormack, I wouldn't want to be taking any sort of donation and commingling with anything like that. And like I said, I'm not saying anything specifically bad is going on, but it's interesting to see the connection because, Jesse's in some way associated with Peter McCormack, who is also associated with Brock Pierce. So, and Brock Pierce is the co-founder of Tether, as I'm sure you're well aware. So it all seems to like go in a circle. It all seems like they're all connected in some way or another. And then with all of these different allegations from different people, who was it? I think it was Brock Pierce, who was, there was something about child sex trafficking, or am I thinking of the wrong person?
Okay. I'll start this off just by saying, yes, cryptocurrencies are a very incestuous industry in general, because when you reflect on the power players, they all go back to only a decade ago, and or less even, right? 5 to 10 years ago, and they all know each other and they all work together. And there's people who will say, well, that's just, the industry is new. That's how it's going to happen until more and more and more people get involved, and then it will essentially decentralize. But then, yeah, of course, there's people who also look at it and say, well, these connections are super weird, and this money that moves between these people at this time or whatever,
Right.
is strange, and I think it's hard to deny that too. So I'm not going to make allegations either. I don't think that there's any proof of anything other than looking at it and saying this is a very
It's
tight
interesting.
cabal of individuals. Brock,
Definitely not bringing any type of allegations against anybody, but it, like I said, it's interesting to see the connections.
it is, and I think Brock Pierce. Yeah, so Brock Pierce has a really weird history,
Right.
and he was involved with a guy named Mark Collins Rector in the 1990s as the internet bubble began to just explode and then pop, ultimately. But he was involved with these guys who, yes, who were absolutely sex trafficking and doing, were, pedophiles.
Right.
Uh, Brock Pierce was never never he was never ultimately, he never was charged with anything, right? Nothing ever came to fruition in regards to Brock himself.
If I'm not mistaken, and I don't mean to cut you off because I want you to continue, but didn't they say that he did, and then the person that brought up the allegations just dropped it themselves or something?
Yes.
Okay.
That's true. And then, I mean, I think it's weird. He fled the U.S. with a known sex trafficking guy, and lived with this guy in Marbella, Spain, and was caught in the house with him. They were all arrested together in Spain, with child porn on computers and just, bad stuff. But it doesn't end there. It's not like it ends there. Actually,
Right.
Brock is connected to Steve Bannon. I don't know if, I assume most people are now familiar with Steve Bannon, but Steve Bannon was more or less responsible for Donald Trump becoming president when he did. He's incredibly influential in many, many, many ways. Former Goldman Sachs. So he's involved with Steve Bannon. They helped set up essentially, I don't know how what to call this other than using Chinese slave labor to get the best gear in games, whether it was like World of Warcraft or other games. Basically, a huge, a lot of MMO players from the early years hate Brock Pierce because he helped ruin a lot of their games through this business model that he had created. That business model that he created, where he used, Chinese cheap Chinese labor to make a lot of money in video games. He then used that money to purchase Bitcoin and Bitcoin miners, and got incredibly involved in the cryptocurrency scene. He also helped move a bunch of people to Puerto Rico, claiming that it was because of, just out of the goodness of their heart to help the people of Puerto Rico. In reality, it's just because you get really great tax benefits for living in Puerto Rico. There's no other reason. The Puerto Ricans don't want them there. The Puerto Ricans don't want any of these people there. They really see it as just more white people coming in and colonizing their
Right.
lovely little nation, island nation. So yeah. So, and I don't mean little in any derogatory way.
Right.
But yeah. So anyway, there's a fraught history there for sure. And this guy is deeply, deeply involved in the cryptocurrency space. He has connections with a lot of companies, and I urge everyone to look into him. And if you can see relations, pause and ask yourself how trustworthy that company or that cryptocurrency may be.
You mentioned, and I'm sorry, this is kind of, you mentioned World of Warcraft. So was he part of that whole thing? And I want to say it was like 2011, 2012, somewhere around that area, where it was like the second expansion came out, and then all of a sudden there were so many talks of like Chinese farmers on the game farming in-game gold. Is that what you're talking about? That's what he was doing, and then they were taking and selling that the in-game gold and then selling it for Bitcoin. Is that what I gathered?
Not for Bitcoin at the time. So what I actually wrote a little story on this. It's on, excuse me, on my Medium page, which is the Cas CAS.
We'll get it. We'll get it tagged below.
Yeah. It's the title of the piece is "Oh God, Not Brock Pierce Again." And this is when he was running for president in this past election. There's a video with that John Oliver did years ago that I think everyone should watch, that talks about some of the things he's done. But yeah, so one of the other things that he did, IGE's business model, I'm just going to go ahead and read from it a little bit here. It says IGE's business model was to underpay a bunch of Chinese kids to play games like EverQuest and World of Warcraft eventually. And then later, as a growing chorus of MMO gaming fans joined in forums to discuss their hatred of IG's business model, others were deciding it was worthwhile to file lawsuits against the business and destroy it in alternative ways. Eventually, Blizzard put pressure on IGE and forced them to stop doing what they were doing. So yes, there was a period of time where players and ultimately Blizzard Entertainment themselves were getting so upset about the stuff that Brock Pierce was responsible for that they shut this down completely. So IGE went out, they stopped doing their business model, and Brock relinquished control of it. But he had made so much money from that he then took that money. He couldn't do this business model anymore. He had to find a new thing. And that's when he fell into
Bitcoin.
Exactly.
That's very interesting. I was actually a part of that whole thing. I'm such a nerd. I played World of Warcraft for like 10 years. I had no idea that Brock Pierce was behind that whole like freaking Chinese farmer thing. I remember that, and I remember playing the game and being so angry because it really did ruin the economy in game. From all that's hilarious. I'm sorry. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on. I don't think anybody really understands like the whole gist of the entire scope of everything, so to speak. I mean, there's a lot of interesting connections, there's a lot of interesting allegations and different things going on in the space. I think generally speaking, I guess me personally, I'm more concerned about the state of stable coins moving forward, especially since, Coinbase, I think it was just a couple of days ago, came out and said that US dollar coin is not backed by US dollars anymore. And, things like that. And then the Tether, it's like, okay, we've got a whole lot of liquidity from all of these stable coins in the market. What happens if all of a sudden they're just not there? Is it going to crash the entire market? Maybe not, but it's still frustrating to see all of these things, because if you say you're going to do something as a business, you should probably just do what you said you were going to do. But of course, I guess things aren't always that easy.
Yeah. People will say that it was due to regulators and due to banks not being willing to work with them, and there's a million different excuses for why they're not able to accomplish what should be just sticking to your promise, like you're talking about. So yeah, there's big issues there. I think USDC is clearly seeing some pushback and some serious problems now. And yeah, we're talking ultimately about, I don't know how much, 80, 90, $100 billion in liquidity for the system.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, especially for cryptocurrency. And if every stablecoin, which this I am almost 100% sure this isn't how it would go down, but if every stablecoin were to be frozen at the same time, it would absolutely destroy the ecosystem, at least for the short to medium term.
Right.
For sure. That is not how it would go down. The very worst thing I think that regulators could do, and they could do this, if they got their hands on the multi-sig holders for Tether, they could definitely just like freeze all tethers. And if they froze all tethers, you would see a disruption in the system. People who tell you that, oh, the price of Bitcoin would just go up, they're wrong.
Well, there is an interesting correlation, and I'm sorry to cut you off again. There is an interesting correlation between Tether and Bitcoin and the price movement, is because, for example, over the last few months where we saw nothing but bearish price action on Bitcoin, it directly correlated with Tether stopping printing or minting coins. And then when Tether, it does seem like when Tether is printing more coins, all of a sudden we see the price of Bitcoin go up. So, I mean, there is an interesting correlation there. And if Tether isn't printing anymore and all of their funds are frozen, then that would probably, and that's one of the main reasons I think that some people are so into this idea or this concept that Tether is the thing backing up Bitcoin right now, is because there is such a correlation between what Tether's doing and Bitcoin's price. So
Right. I mean, there's certainly seems to be something going on. And like I said, I people try to proposition the idea that it would be a boon for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general if Tether were stomped out. That's simply just not true. And I can't. Maybe in the long term, it'd be like ripping a Band-Aid off and eventually seeing the wound heal faster. But in terms of it being good for price action in the short term and medium term, there just is absolutely no truth to that. And I don't listen to people who tell you that is true. Now, when it comes to what the actual risks are, the risk that Tether gets completely shut down, I don't know what those risks are. And really, this is all about your own risk appetite at the end of the day, right? If you don't see this as a big issue and you just want to invest, I'm not going to stop you.
right.
So
That's cryptocurrency as a whole, though. Everybody should know that you're taking on some type of inherent risk just by investing in cryptocurrencies, just as the same as you would investing in the traditional stock market. There's always going to be an inherent risk associated with it.
Yeah. I mean, if you have any other questions or anything, I mean,
well, I think we're good. I think we're getting close to wrapping it up here. Was there anything else that you wanted to touch on? Anything that you wanted to specifically state, or?
I think it's nice having a more simplistic discussion about this between us. I'm not super technical, but if your listeners are, or if they want to delve into some of the more minutia detail stuff, follow my buddy Bennett Tomlin. He has a lot of good articles and he talks about this a lot. And he's more bullish on Bitcoin in general, but also bullish on Tether being heavily regulated. So I don't know. There's a lot of perspectives to see out there, and feel free to enjoy all of them.
You guys have a YouTube channel too, right?
Yes, we have a YouTube channel, and it's the same as our podcast. So you either can listen to the podcast or check it out on YouTube, and
we'll provide the links down below.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and I've been writing for Protoss Media, which is cryptocurrency news lately. So if anyone wants to check them out, feel free to do that too.
All right. Well, Cas, I do appreciate you so very much coming on the show and just sharing your wealth of knowledge and information and kind of chatting with me for a little bit. So thank you so much for coming. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and making the time for it. I appreciate it too.
Definitely. Well, with that being said, everyone, I really hope you enjoyed today's video. Let us know down in the comments below who you think we should interview next or any questions that you may want answered. And with that being said, that is going to conclude it for us today, guys. I hope you have a great day and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.